Hi, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of The Apparition, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the 26 books that I want to read for the year 2026. And this list was so hard to compile because there's so many books that I want to read, and it was really hard to whittle it down to just 26. But these are some of the ones that I really hope to get to this year. We're going to start off with the thrillers. The first two are YA thrillers. We have Four Found Dead, and this is about a group of teenagers, and they work at this movie theater, which is the only business that is still in this shopping mall where it's located. Everything else has gone out of business already, but after a couple of years, the movie theater itself can't keep up either, and it's about to be shuttered forever. So this is the last night, the last movie that will be at this theater ever. So I have 6 coworkers, and this is their last shift. But after all the moviegoers are gone and they go to leave, they can't find the key, and the key opens the safe that has all of their cell phones in it because they have to put them away when they start their shift. Plus, I'm not 100% sure if they need the key to open the doors as well or not, but either way, they are without cell phones, and then the power goes out. And because this mall is huge and dark and shuttered and there's lots of places to hide, they can't find their way out. And then one of the coworkers is found dead, and they realize that they're not in that mall by themselves, that they're actually being hunted. And then we have That's Not My Name, and this is about this girl who has gone missing, and she's finally found by the police, but she has no memory of what happened to her or even who she is. And so at the police station, this man walks in declaring that he's her father, and he goes to take her home. But when he says what her name is, it kind of strikes her wrong, and she's like, I don't know if that's my name. And she doesn't know if she can trust this man because she doesn't know if he actually is her father or if he's just saying that he is. So I wanted to read those two YA thrillers specifically because I had them on my TBR for last year and I wasn't able to get to them, and so I decided to re-put them on this list. And then I have 3 adult thrillers, starting with Look in the Mirror by Catherine Steadman. And I read The Family Game by this author and really enjoyed it. And this one, the premise sounded really intriguing. And this is about 2 different women. One named Nina, who inherits this vacation home from her father, and she had no idea that her father owned this property. She didn't even think her dad could afford such a property. So now she's kind of wondering what else her father is keeping from her and what secrets he has to hide. And then we have Maria, and she's a nanny, and she generally works for rich people, and so she gets to go to these exciting locales usually and take care of the kids while the parents are vacationing and stuff. And so it doesn't explicitly say it, but I'm assuming that Nina was the one that hired her, and she's going to this vacation spot that she inherited. But when she gets to this vacation home, nobody's there. There's no kids, there's no parents, nothing. And so she decides, well, I'm just gonna stay in this house then and just, partake in the sauna and the hot tub and the pool and just, live in luxury for a while, And so she decides to stay, but there's a note that tells her to stay out of the basement. So sounds very intriguing. And then we have Number One Fan, and this one sounds pretty much like a retelling of Misery, but a gender reversal. So instead of a man being kidnapped by a woman, we have a woman author who is kidnapped by a man. And so she's out partying one night, I think, or maybe she's not partying. She's at a speaking engagement for her next book. And then she gets in the cab to go home, and she is offered a drink by the cabbie, and something was in that drink, and she ends up in this guy's basement chained to the wall. And he happens to know everything there is to know about her books and is very invested in her fictional worlds. So I love Misery. It's one of my all-time favorite Stephen King novels. So I have high hopes that I'm going to enjoy this one. And then we have The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark. And this is about a woman who is a ghostwriter, and she's actually the only living child of a man named Vincent Taylor. And he's this very famous horror novelist, and she is hired to ghostwrite for him. And this is supposed to be his last ever novel. I'm not sure why. Maybe he has health problems or something. But when she goes to take on this project, she is unaware that it's not a horror novel that she's going to be writing. It's actually his memoir. He finally wants to come clean with what happened in his past, because back in the 70s, his siblings were murdered, and he was in the house at the time, and he was the only one that survived. And so people kind of suspected that maybe he was the one that killed his siblings, but nobody could ever pin anything on him. And so now he wants to talk about that night. And so she's intrigued to write this novel for him. And it's unclear, again, from the premise, whether Vincent Vincent knows that this is his daughter or not, or if she's keeping that secret from him. So I'm intrigued to find out which one it is, if he knows or not. Okay, so now I have 4 horror novels that I want to read, which was very hard to whittle down because horror is my number one. Well, I don't know. I think horror and thriller are both my number one genres, and so trying to whittle it down to 4 was very hard. But the first one I want to read is Bad Eaters because everybody and their dog has been talking about this in 2025, and I never got to it, and everybody seems to love this book, and so I just really want to get to it. So this is about this Chinese woman whose sister was targeted in a bigoted attack because she was Chinese, and it was during COVID when people had issues with the fact that this disease came from China, and so they pushed her sister in front of a train. So now she cleans up crime scenes, and apparently recently at all of the crime scenes that she's been cleaning up, somebody has been leaving a bat, and since the disease came from bats, she feels like this is a message to her. So it's pretty short, and like I say, everybody loves this seemingly, and so I'm very excited to get to this one. And then we have One Yellow Eye. And if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I absolutely adore Frankenstein. And this is supposed to be Frankenstein-esque, except make it zombies. And so this is set during an apocalyptic world where there are zombies. And her husband contracts the disease. And instead of putting him down, she's hiding him in her basement because she is determined that she can find a cure because she was like a microbiologist or something to do with like the medical field or science or something. And so she is bound and determined that she can cure her husband, that he's still in there somewhere. And so she's trying to keep the secret from everybody else. And her last name is even Shelley, so I'm hoping that means that there is going to be some Frankensteinian typeness to this book. And then we have The Hong Kong Widow, and this one is set during the 1950s, but in Hong Kong. And so we have this woman who apparently something in her past happened that ruined her family's life. And she somehow learns of this competition where for 6 nights they're going to perform 6 seances, and so they're looking for spirit mediums that can travel to this mansion, which is purportedly haunted, and these clairvoyant people are part of this competition to see which one can talk to the ghosts that are seemingly in this house. And so she goes there as a spirit medium. I'm not sure if she actually is one or if she's just pretending to be one, but the hostess of the event, she's actually a Chinese silent film star, and apparently she's the wife of the man that ruined her life and ruined her family, and so she's actually there for revenge. And so then in the future they talk about a massacre that took place during this competition, and so she's trying to come to terms with what she saw in that house during that day. So when I read that, I was a little bit disappointed. I hope this is a dual timeline because I really wanted to actually see the competition in real time and watch it play out. So I'm hoping there's flashbacks at the very least because I really wanted to see that part. That's the part that intrigued me the most. And so I don't want to have it all be over and she's just reminiscing about it, So I'm hoping that we get some of the past in some of the chapters. And then we have The Place Where They Buried Your Heart. And this is a brand new book by Christina Henry, and I love Christina Henry, and it's also a haunted house book. And if you know me at all, you know that I absolutely adore ghost stories and haunted house books. They're my favorite. I love gothic tales and all of that. So this one isn't really gothic because it's, I guess you could call it like a modern gothic or something. But anyways, this is about the quintessential haunted house that's on this street that everybody knows is haunted. And so as kids do, they're always daring each other to go inside. And so our main character, her brother, was dared to go inside of this house, but unlike the other children, he never came back out, and he went missing and nobody ever found him again. And so all of the kids are like, the house ate him, the house took him. But adults obviously don't believe that. They think that something more mundane but no less sinister happened. They think he was kidnapped and murdered. Nobody really knows. And so our main character is all grown up now and married, and she has her own child, and she's still living on this street where this house is. And I love this blurb right here. It says, "The house is awake and it's hungry." So I'm very excited for this. And then speaking of gothicness, this isn't really gothic horror. It's more like gothic suspense or gothic romance. But I have 2 books that I am very ashamed to say that I haven't read yet because I really should have read these books before, but I haven't. The first one being Jane Eyre. Yep, never read Jane Eyre. I started it like 17 years ago or something. I made it to page 145 and I really was enjoying it. It wasn't because I wasn't enjoying it that I stopped. I wasn't DNFing it or anything. Back back then I didn't even know the term DNF, and I didn't DNF books, but at least not consciously. But anyways, it was just a little bit slow, and so I really did like it, but I was in the mood for something faster paced, and so I just decided to temporarily put it down and read something else and come back to it. But then I never went back to it. And then it's since been spoiled for me, so I know what the twist at the end is, which is such a bummer, because if I would have read it at the time, then I wouldn't have known that twist and it would have been so much more impactful, but it is what it is. And then we have Rebecca. And this one has not been spoiled for me, thank goodness, so I don't know what the twist or mystery is in this book. And I don't even really know for sure 100% what this book is about. I know there's this woman who goes to this house called Manderley, and there's some kind of mystery, or I don't know if this one has ghosts. I don't think it does, but I think it's more of like a gothic murder mystery or something. And I think she marries this man, but he was married before, and so she's kind of competing with the ghost of his wife, like not the actual ghost, but like the memory, I guess, of his first wife. And so I don't know if the man she married is a good guy or not. I have a feeling he's probably not. It sounds very Jane Eyre-esque, so I don't think I would read these like back to back, because they do sound very, very similar to each other. But at some point this year, I really want to get to both of these books, because these classics have been on my TBR for ages, and I have no excuse for having not read them. Okay, so now we're going to get into fantasy. The first three are like gothic fantasy with horror elements, so they're fantasy, but they're a little bit more creepy and dark. So the first one is a YA novel called Belladonna, and I've heard really good things about this one, and I love the cover. I think it's gorgeous, but I was waiting for the entire trilogy to be out before I read it. But even when the third book came out, I just haven't gotten to it yet. I haven't read it yet, so I need to rectify that. So this is about a girl who is an orphan, and she's now 19, and she's been passed along from family member to family member, but they've all met an untimely end, and so she just keeps being passed around. And so the newest family members that she's with now, she's at their remote manor, and she ends up seeing her mother's ghost in this house, who tells her that she's been poisoned and that the family that she's with now is in danger, that somebody wants to kill them. And so she enlists the help of this stable boy to help her track down the killer. And somehow she has like a personal relationship with death. So I don't know. It's defined as a gothic romance with horror elements, and that just sounds right up my alley. So I'm very excited for this trilogy. I hope I love it. And then we have The House Safer, or Safer. I'm not really sure how you pronounce that. And this is by Marissa Meyer. And I fell in love with Marissa Meyer when I read The Lunar Chronicles, which is a YA fairy tale retelling with science fiction. I absolutely adore that series, and so I've consistently picked up everything that she's written since, with mixed results, but this one sounds right up my alley, and I'm so freaking excited for this. You have no idea. So this is a fairy tale retelling of Bluebeard, and just like Belladonna, it is classified as a gothic romance fairy tale retelling, but with horror elements, and which just sounds like a book made for me. So this is about this woman who is summoned to this house by this wealthy man because she is the latest long line of witches, but unfortunately she doesn't actually have any magical abilities whatsoever other than she can see ghosts. But her and her sister, they still sell spells and potions and stuff that don't actually work because they're not actually witches like they pretend to be. But this wealthy family hires her to come to their house and, perform some kind of spell or ritual or something for them. But when she gets there, she has heard rumors about this man's father, who had 3 different wives who have all died under mysterious circumstances. But they've always just been rumors. But now that she's at the house, she can actually see their ghosts. But she feels like the man who hired her is pretty gullible, and so she wants to hoodwink him into making a lot of money, and so she stays. But then in the present, another murder takes place, and so I believe the man that hired her is who she's going to be falling in love with. But it sounds really, really good, and I'm so excited to read this. And then we have A Land So Wide, and I absolutely adore Erin Craig. I've loved everything that she's written, and so I'm very excited for this because this is her adult debut. So I'm very excited to read something that is an adult novel because all of her other books have been YA. So this one sounds a little bit like Small Favors, if you've read that YA book of hers, because it sounds like a folk horror, but I think it's going to be a little bit more fantasy than horror. But at the same time, I believe it does have these vampiric type creatures in it. And so this takes place in the Canadian wilderness, and they have these warding stones around the town of Mistaken where she lives, and basically it's warding out these creatures and keeping them in the woods and away from their village. But the thing about their village is once you visit, you pretty much have to stay. It's not safe to leave. So I'm very excited for this, and I hope I love it as much as her YA novels, if not more. And then we have The Familiar by Lee Bardugo. I've never read anything by this author before, but this takes place in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition, and after the book I'm currently writing, I'm actually also going to be writing a book that takes place during the same time period, also in Spain. And so I was really excited to read another book that takes place during this time and in this place. And in this case, there's this woman who is, I guess you could call her a witch. So she could perform what she calls little miracles, but she's just a scullery maid. But her mistress discovers one day that she can perform these little miracles, and she exploits that and uses her to up her social status. But as you can guess, I'm sure that's going to go out of control and not be what she wants. And she is Jewish, and so during the time of the Inquisition, if she gets found out for being Jewish, she will be tortured and most likely killed. And so she's trying to keep her secret while at the same time keeping her mistress happy. You know, it's called The Familiar, and it sounds like she meets this man that ends up being her familiar that's supposed to be helping her or something like that. I haven't really heard the best reviews on this book, which makes me a little bit scared to read it because it doesn't seem like a lot of people like it. But I'm hoping, because I like history so much, that maybe even though it didn't work for them, it will work for me. I don't know, we'll see. And then we have Bloodguard, and this one intrigued me because of the inside. So you have like this Roman looking dude that's a gladiator, but it looks like instead of guys he's fighting like a dragon or something. So I found that very intriguing. So basically this is about this gladiator, and he's trying to become a gladiator to save up money to basically like buy his sister's freedom or something like that. But something must go wrong because everything's taken from him, and he's forced to remain a gladiator, and now all he thinks about is revenge because of what happened to him. But then he meets this elven princess, and she tells him that she can help him become a blood guard, which is, I think, like the highest ranking you can get as a gladiator. And if he receives this title, he also wins his freedom and he doesn't have to be a gladiator anymore. So it sounds like the movie The Gladiator, but make it fantasy, you know, with dragons and elves and stuff. So I find that very intriguing. So I'm very excited to get to this one. And then I have 4 science fiction novels, and I've already talked about these on my channel, so forgive me that you've probably already heard of these, but I just still haven't read them yet. So the first one is Ship of Fools, and I heard this has some horror elements to it. It doesn't sound like it does when you read the back, but that's just what I've heard from other reviews. But anyways, this is about this generational ship that's been floating out in space for hundreds of years after Earth was destroyed, desperately trying to find a planet to land on. And so they finally receive a signal, and they go towards the planet where the signal is coming from. But when they arrive, it seems like something bad might have happened on this planet. And then we have Hyperion by Dan Simmons, and this is a science fiction classic which I really need to get to. And this is about the 7 pilgrims that go to the time tombs, I think they're called, which are like structures that pull you into the past and through time. And so it sounds like, from what I understand, this is 7 different stories that are kind of linked, and they're supposed to be like the 7 Canterbury Tales. And then there's this being called the Shrike that's trying to stop them from traveling back in the past. And some people think he's great and worship him, and some people hate him and want to kill him. And so he's just kind of this mysterious figure. But I hear incredible things about it, and I'm excited to see what it's all about. And then we have Empire of Silence, and we have this man named Hadrian, and he leaves home because he doesn't want to be a torturer like his dad, but he gets embroiled in the war on a planet that he's not supposed to be on, where he was forced to be a gladiator, and something goes down and he ends up inadvertently killing like 4 billion people in this mass genocide. And so people either hate him or love him depending on where your politics lied and what you felt about this genocide. I do hear that in the first book a lot of people don't like Hadrian, and if I don't like the main character, I'm not sure how I'm gonna get on with the book, but I hear it gets better if you go farther into the series. So even if I end up not absolutely loving the first book, I'm going to at least read the second book to see if that's true, to see if it does get better if I don't like it. But I hear good things about it, and I am very excited for it. I mainly haven't read it because it's super, super long. It's like 700 or 800 pages, and I'm always like, oh, but I could read 3 different books in the same amount of time that it would take me just to read this. So I know it's terrible to think that way, but I do. I didn't used to, but now that I have a YouTube channel, I feel the need to read as many books as possible, and I really try not to get that pressure and to feel that way, but it's there. So that's the biggest reason I haven't read it, is simply because it's so long and so big. And speaking of big, long books, same reason goes for Children of Time. And I've heard people call this a modern classic, that this is going to be in the history books of science fiction that everybody will read one day because it's very, very good. And I'm hoping it's not overhyped though, because when people start to talk like that, I get a little bit nervous. But this sounds a lot like Ship of Fools in the fact that we have these people that are traveling on this ship from an Earth that has been destroyed or is at least dying, and they find this planet where they decide to make their own planet. But when they get there, there's already an alien race there, and apparently they're giant spiders, which I'm kind of nervous about because I hate spiders. I am very, very, very arachnophobic, so I don't know how I'm gonna deal with these spider aliens. But I don't know, it seems intriguing, and it seems like this alien race is trying to enslave the humans that have landed on their planet. But I hear very, very good things about this one, so I'm hoping to get to it this year. Fingers crossed. And then I have 4 romances that I want to read. The first one is a YA romance called Dungeons and Drama. And so we have this girl who's a drama geek, and she really wants to make it famous on the stage. And then we have the quintessential nerd who plays Dungeons and Dragons and is a gamer and all of that. And so she has to work at this nerdy gamer store that her dad owns, and she really doesn't want to. She doesn't like this job. And so she decides to delegate some of her responsibilities and her shift to this nerdy guy that she knew from school that can help her out. And then because he's helping her at work, she tells him that she'll help him make his girlfriend jealous, I guess, because something's going on there. I don't know. He just wants to make her jealous. And so they strike up this fake romance or whatever, but then she starts to fall for him in real time. So I'm also wanting to read this because my husband is also a D&D player and is also a nerd. And so it just reminds me of my husband. And I just think it sounds really, really cute. You know, I really like Stranger Things, and the whole 80s Dungeons and Demons vibe, you know, is part of my favorite part of that show. And so I just thought reading a cute little YA romance that involves that would be a fun time. And then we have fan service, and we have these 2 people who are on a TV show together where they try to hunt down these fictional supernatural things. And it's a show about like a werewolf detective or something. But then come to find out later that her co-star actually is a werewolf in real life. I hear good things about this. It sounds fun. And then we have The Roughest Draft, and this is about these 2 authors who are both famous in their own right, and so their publishers wanted them to write a book together and do a collaboration, and it goes really, really well. But then they have a falling out, and they don't talk to each other for 3 years, but they're under contract to co-write another novel, which happens to be a romance novel. So now they're forced to get together to collaborate on this project. So I love romances that have to do with authors and writing or the publishing world or anything like that. So I'm very intrigued by this one. And then we have First Time Caller, and this is supposed to be like Sleepless in Seattle. And after reading the premise, I definitely see why, because we have this man who does this late night radio show about love or romance or something, and he doesn't really believe in romance anymore, but you know, this is his job, so he just grits his teeth and bears with it. And then her son ends up calling into his show, or maybe it's her daughter, I'm not sure. Her kid calls into the show and says, you know, my mom needs to have a boyfriend. And so ratings skyrocket from people that are listening in, and so he thinks this is a good opportunity to maybe reignite his love for his own show. And so he's trying to hook her up with a special someone and help them find their happily ever after. But she's actually catching feelings for him instead of the guy that she's supposed to be falling in love with, and she knows that the public will be disappointed if she doesn't choose him. But you know, she's having feelings for this guy. So it sounds very cute, sounds very fun. I hear good things about it. Excited to get to it. And then the last 2 I think are literary fiction. So we have Yellowface, and I had this on my 25 books to read in 2025, or it could even been my 2024 list. Either way, this was on my list a year or 2 ago, and I never got to it. And I hear really good things about it. Basically, we have this woman who is horrible, and she is friends with this Chinese girl who is writing a book about things that have to do specifically with Chinese culture, but she appropriates her novel and passes it off as her own after she passes away. I hear the main character isn't very likable, but I think it's on purpose. Like, I don't think you're supposed to like her, and so that's fine. If I read a book that I'm supposed to be rooting for the main character but I don't like them, then that's different. But if I go into the book knowing they're going to be unlikable, then I don't have a problem with that. But I don't know, I think it sounds pretty interesting. And then this last book I actually found in a free little library, and I'd never heard of it before, and it actually sounds remarkably similar to Yellowface, but it's called Romantic Friction. And this is kind of the same premise-ish, where this woman writes this novel, but people accuse her of using AI to write this novel. And so there's going to be a lot of commentary on AI, which I find is a very intriguing topic, especially as an author myself. And so I'm very intrigued to read this one. Or actually, maybe she did actually use the AI. It says she's a self-published debut author who writes in the style of Sophie Wilde. So this is about this woman named Sophie, and she's a very famous author who writes fantasy romance, and she's on her 10th and final book for her series that she's been writing. And then there's an up-and-coming self-published author who has a debut come out, and people are going wild for it because it sounds very similar to Sophie Wilde's style of writing. But then it come to find out that this new debut author has used AI to write her novel for her. And so Sophie kind of sits back expecting her to be skewered and people to hate her and, her career to go down the toilet basically. But she's shocked to find out that the fans of this author in this book are actually calling her innovative. And so she's like, what? So I just love the commentary there because, again, I think AI has its uses in certain areas, but in the creative field, I don't think it has a place, and it's a cop-out and should not be used. But it says, Sophie is surrounded by her fellow authors who fear their futures, their livelihoods, and their art will be stripped away one AI prompt at a time. So it just seems very timely and very interesting, and I'm excited to see what it's all about. So that's it. That's the 26 books I'm hoping to read this year. Good luck to me. Hopefully I do better than I have in previous years, because I've not been very good at reading the books that I set up for this list, but I'm hoping to change that this year, hopefully. So if you want to wish me luck, please give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.